January 3, 1944, a lone F4U Corsair screams across the Pacific sky near Rabaul. The pilot inside has just shot down his 26th enemy aircraft, tying the legendary Eddie Rickenbacker's World War I record. He's about to go for number 27, but in the next 60 seconds, everything will change. 20 Japanese Zeros are closing in, and this cocky Marine Corps pilot who has already lived 3 lifetimes worth of chaos is about to disappear into the Pacific Ocean for 20 months. His name, Gregory Pappy Boyington. And this is the story of how a broke, dishonorably discharged, alcoholic daredevil became one of America's most decorated fighter aces, and why his squadron of misfits became the most legendary unit in Marine Corps history. Gregory Boyington was born on December 4, 1912 in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, but here's where things get complicated right from the start. For most of his early life, he believed his biological father was a man named Ellsworth Hollenbeck. The truth: his mother had left his actual father, Charles Boyington, when Greg was just an infant. She remarried, and young Greg grew up thinking his stepfather was his real dad. That confusion about identity, it would define him for decades. Growing up in Tacoma, Washington, Greg was small for his age, scrappy, and always looking for a fight. Not because he was particularly mean, but because he had something to prove. Kids teased him. He hit back. It became a pattern. When you feel like you don't quite fit in, sometimes your fists become your vocabulary. But Greg had something else going for him. He was smart, really smart. He excelled in school and earned a spot at the University of Washington, where he joined the ROTC and discovered things that would shape his entire life: flying and drinking. The flying part made sense. In the 1930s, aviation was the frontier, the wild, romantic edge of human achievement. Boyington took to it like he was born in the cockpit. He was a natural. Aggressive, fearless, with reflexes that seemed almost superhuman. He earned his commission as a second lieutenant in the Marine Corps Reserve in 1935 and became a naval aviator in 1937. The drinking part, that was more complicated. Boyington had demons. He was brilliant but undisciplined. Talented but self-destructive, he married his college sweetheart, Helene, and they had 3 children, but domesticity didn't suit him. He was restless, broke, and increasingly bitter about his slow progression in the peacetime military. By 1941, Boyington was drowning in debt, stuck in a dead-end position, and watching the world prepare for war from the sidelines. Then came an offer that seemed too good to be true. The American volunteer group in China, better known as the Flying Tigers, was recruiting experienced pilots. The pay, $600 a month plus $500 for every Japanese plane you shot down. For Boyington, it wasn't even a question. He resigned his Marine Corps commission, signed up, and headed to Asia. Some called it adventure. Others called it running away. Boyington probably called it both. Here's what they don't always tell you about the Flying Tigers. They were mercenaries. Brave, skilled, important mercenaries who did crucial work defending China against Japanese aggression, but mercenaries nonetheless. And like any group of hired guns, they had big personalities and even bigger egos. Boyington fit right in ... and also didn't fit in at all. He arrived in China in 1941 and quickly proved he could fly circles around most pilots. He was aggressive in combat, creative in tactics, and absolutely fearless. He shot down 6 Japanese aircraft during his time with the Flying Tigers officially, though he always claimed more. But his commanding officer, Claire Chennault, couldn't stand him. Why? Because Boyington was insubordinate, constantly drunk, and seemed pathologically incapable of following orders. He'd argue with commanders, miss briefings, and generally act like the rules didn't apply to him. Which, in Boyington's mind, they probably didn't. Here's the thing about Gregory Boyington: he was a brilliant tactician who understood air combat on an instinctive level, but he absolutely refused to operate within any structure he didn't create himself. It's a pattern you see with certain kinds of genius. They can see things others can't, but they can't explain it, and they resent anyone who questions them. By 1942, Boyington's time with the Flying Tigers was over. He'd been effective but impossible. When the unit disbanded and was absorbed into the regular U.S. Army Air Forces, Boyington wasn't invited to stay. He headed back to the States broke, divorced, and with his reputation in tatters. Most people would see that as rock bottom. Boyington saw it as intermission. September 1942, Boyington is back in the United States, and the Marine Corps, desperate for experienced combat pilots, reinstates him with his original rank. He's sent to the Pacific, where the war is brutal, island by island, and every fighter pilot is worth their weight in gold. But here's where the story gets interesting. In September 1943, Major Boyington is given command of VMF-214, a Marine fighter squadron based in the South Pacific. The unit already exists, but it's been gutted. Many of its original pilots were transferred or killed. What Boyington inherits is essentially a blank slate, and he fills it with rejects. Seriously, Boyington handpicks pilots that nobody else wants. Guys who've been in trouble. Hotshots who've been grounded for disciplinary reasons. Pilots with attitudes, drinking problems, and chips on their shoulders the size of aircraft carriers. He looks at these misfits and sees himself. More importantly, he sees potential. He names them the Blacksheep Squadron. The other squadrons laugh. The top brass is skeptical. But Boyington knows something they do and sometimes the people who do fit into the system are the ones who change the game entirely. His philosophy is simple but radical. Train hard, fly aggressively, and ignore peacetime rules that don't make sense in combat. He teaches his pilots to hunt in coordinated pairs, to use the Corsair's superior speed and firepower to their advantage, and to never, ever fight fair. If you're in a fair fight, Boyington would say, your tactics suck. The F4U Corsair they flew was the perfect machine for this kind of warfare. With its distinctive bent wings, massive engine, and heavy armament, the Corsair was faster and more powerful than almost anything the Japanese had. It was also difficult to fly. It had a nasty tendency to stall during carrier landings, which is why the Navy initially rejected it for carrier use. But in the hands of a skilled pilot, it was absolutely deadly. Boyington and his Blacksheep made it sing. Between September and December 1943, the Blacksheep Squadron goes on a rampage across the South Pacific. They're based in the Solomon Islands, and their job is to escort bombers, conduct ground attacks, and sweep the skies clean of Japanese fighters. They exceed expectations by an absurd margin. In just 84 days, the Blacksheep Squadron shoots down 90 for enemy aircraft confirmed, with another 65 listed as probable. They destroy ground targets, disrupt Japanese operations, and develop a reputation for being absolutely relentless. And at the center of it all is Pappy, the nickname he earned for being older than most of his pilots at the ancient age of 31. He leads from the front, flying every dangerous mission, and his personal kill count starts climbing fast. 16 victories, 20 victories. 20 for victories. War correspondents start paying attention. They interview Boyington and his men, and the press eats it up. A rough-talking, hard-drinking Marine leading a squadron of misfits against impossible odds. It's the perfect American story. Boyington becomes a celebrity, which he both loves and hates in equal measure. But there's something else happening beneath the surface. Boyington is pushing himself to the breaking point. He's flying multiple missions a day, drinking heavily between flights, and carrying the weight of command on shoulders that were never very good at carrying weight. His kill count is approaching Eddie Rickenbacker's World War I record of 26 victories, and the pressure, both internal and external, is immense. On January 3, 1944, Boyington leads a fighter sweep over Rabaul, one of the most heavily defended Japanese positions in the Pacific. He shoots down to aircraft, bringing his total to 26. He's tied the record. The sky around him is chaos, zeros everywhere, tracers cutting through the air, radio screaming with chatter. He goes for one more, and that's when everything goes black. Multiple Japanese fighters jump Boyington's Corsair. His wingman, Captain George Ashman, later reports seeing Boyington's plane smoking and trailing flame before it disappears toward the ocean. No parachute, no radio call, nothing. Back at base, the Blacksheep wait. Then they grieve. Major Gregory Pappy Boyington is listed as missing in action, presumed killed. But he isn't dead. Boyington had managed to bail out of his burning Corsair, though his parachute caught fire during the descent. He hit the water hard, wounded, and barely conscious. The Japanese picked him up within hours. At first, they don't realize who they've captured. Then someone recognizes his name from propaganda broadcasts. For the next 20 months, Boyington becomes a prisoner of war. And this is where his story gets truly dark. Japanese POW camps were horrific, especially for captured pilots. The Japanese military culture viewed surrender as the ultimate dishonor, so prisoners were treated with contempt and brutality. Boyington is interrogated, beaten, and moved between several camps. He's starved, diseased, and frequently certain he won't survive another day. The drinking, which had been his crutch for so long, isn't an option anymore. Cold turkey withdrawal in a prison camp mixed with malnutrition and dysentery nearly kills him. But in some strange way, it also saved him. Without the fog of alcohol, Boyington has to confront himself, all his demons, all his failures, all the chaos he's caused, and run from his entire life. He doesn't come out enlightened or reborn. This isn't that kind of story, but he survives. Day after day after day, he survives. Meanwhile, back in the United States, Boyington is declared dead. His family mourns. His squadron keeps fighting, eventually rotating back to the States. The war in the Pacific grinds on Iwo Jima, Okinawa, the firebombing of Japanese cities. The world moves forward while Boyington rots in a cell. And then, August 1945, the atomic bombs fall on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Japan surrenders. American forces sweep into POW camps across Asia, and in a camp near Tokyo, a skeletal Marine with haunted eyes gives his name to a medic. Gregory Boyington is alive. When Boyington returns to the United States in September 1945, he's a ghost returning to a world that thought he was dead. His children barely recognize him. His ex-wife has moved on. The country is celebrating victory, but Boyington feels like he's still in that cell. And then comes the Medal of Honor. President Harry Truman awards Boyington the nation's highest military honor on October 5, 1945. The citation reads, "For extraordinary heroism above and beyond the call of duty as commanding officer of Marine Fighting Squadron VMF-214 in action against enemy Japanese forces in Central Solomons area from September 12, 1943 to January 3, 1944. He also receives the Navy Cross. He's interviewed, photographed, and paraded around as a war hero. America loves a good comeback story, and Boyington the Maverick, who became a legend, was thought dead and returned from hell, is the ultimate comeback. But Boyington himself, he's struggling. Post-traumatic stress disorder isn't widely understood in 1945, especially not among tough guy military culture. You were just supposed to move on, get a job, start a family. Boyington tries. He really does. But the nightmares don't stop. The anger doesn't stop. And eventually, the drinking starts again. He cycles through jobs, wrestling referee, sales jobs, speaking engagements. He marries and divorces twice more. He writes a memoir, Blacksheep, published in 1958, which becomes the basis for a 1970s TV show that turned him into a pop culture icon all over again. The show is wildly inaccurate. It makes everything look fun and light-hearted, but Boyington doesn't seem to mind. At least someone remembers. He spends his later years in Fresno, California, finally achieving something like peace. He stops drinking, actually stops this time, and becomes a mentor to younger veterans. He attends reunions with his Blacksheep, those misfits who became legends alongside him. They're older now, gray-haired, but when they talk about those 84 days in 1943, their eyes light up. Gregory Pappy Boyington dies on January 11, 1988, at the age of 75. He's buried at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors. So, what do we make of Gregory Boyington? He was, by almost any measure, a difficult man. Undisciplined, self-destructive, hard to love and harder to like. He hurt people, disappointed people, and spent most of his life running from demons he could never quite name. But he was also one of the most naturally gifted combat pilots in American history. He saw air combat as three-dimensional chess played at 400 miles per hour, and he played it better than almost anyone. He took a squadron of rejects and turned them into the most effective fighter unit in the Marine Corps. In 84 days of combat, VMF-214 became legendary not because they followed the rules, but because they understood which rules actually mattered. 28 confirmed victories, a Medal of Honor, a Navy Cross, multiple distinguished flying crosses, the respect of every pilot who flew with him. But more than the medals or the kill count, Boyington's real legacy is this: he proved that the people who do and fit in aren't necessarily broken. Sometimes they're just wired for a different kind of excellence. The Blacksheep squadron worked because Boyington understood that misfits, properly led and properly motivated, can achieve things that conventional units never could. Was he a hero? Yeah, absolutely. Was he also a mess? Yeah, that too. And maybe that's the point. Real heroes aren't perfect, they're complicated, flawed, human. They struggle with the same demons we all do: fear, anger, addiction, identity. What makes them heroic isn't that they never fall, it's that they keep getting back up. Boyington spent his entire life crashing and getting back in the cockpit. Whether it was in an F4U Corsair over Rabaul or in his own chaotic personal life, he never stayed down. He just kept fighting, and in the end, maybe that's the most human and most heroic thing about him. If this story moved you, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more untold stories from military history. Drop a comment below and let me know, do you think Boyington's personal demons made him a better combat leader, or did they hold him back from being even greater? It's a genuinely fascinating question. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.